Hey, guys, Graham and Chris here. No, you are not messing your days up. This is a special edition of Out of Left Field coming to you on Tuesday, the day after the trade deadline. Battle, how you doing over there, man?
I'm hot. It's about 110 here in Phoenix, so
yeah, we get triples here in Florida.
To stay cool.
I hear you. Guys, we are very proud and honored to have J.W. Gravley joining us today. He is a writer for 27 Outs Baseball. You can follow him at J.W. Gravley. That's at J.W. Gravley. And you can follow 27 Outs Baseball at 27_Outs Baseball. J.W., thanks for joining us today, bud.
Absolutely. How are you guys doing?
And we're doing all right. We're just trying to hold it down. A lot of craziness goes on. Some things I think we all expected, and some things that I think threw us all for a loop, and some teams that fell flat in the trade deadline.
Yeah.
But, let's start in the American League. Right now the Orioles are sitting on top, and Chris and I, we made our picks for who we thought was going to be making the postseason runs. We both thought Baltimore would be the consensus for the the Eastern Division, but my caveat was they needed to add pitching. We haven't seen Ubaldo Jimenez be anything like he was in Colorado. He went to Cleveland, made it to Baltimore. They added a utility player, but really didn't add anything to me of substance. Did you hear anything, any rumbles from the lower levels, anything from the club, as to why they didn't really make a huge a push for anybody?
That's a good question. Unfortunately, I did not, but I agree with you. I mean, baseball, pitching and defense wins games, and with Baltimore in their division, you got to have good pitching in the American League East. We've seen it in the past. We've seen it with, the Royals that won it last year. They had really good pitching, but they also had, explosive offense but explosive defense. And, it's kind of disappointing, if you're an Orioles fan, to sit there and you're like, man, we need pitching, but we don't have anybody, And some of their guys in their farm system, they've been getting hurt, they've been injured. It's kind of been a bummer for them. And, you got these teams like Boston and New York who made trades to bolster up not just their farm system, but to bolster up, their franchise club, their parent club, and make that playoff push and make that playoff run. So hearing anything I did not, am I shocked that they didn't make a move? Yes. Yes, I am.
So what can you tell us? Because, again, like you said, offense has been no problem for Baltimore. Trumbo's been absolutely hitting out of his mind. Chris Davis has been hitting solid. Matt Wieters is someone I think they want to try and lock up. But what we saw in Boston, which, again, was a team that has been decimated on the mound, Clay Buchholz has been a shell of himself. Kelly hasn't been that well. We've seen Porcello really start to kind of find his own traction. Stephen Wright is holding it down with that knuckleball, and David Price has got a high ERA when he's winning ball games. They bring over Drew Pomeranz, but they had to let go of Anderson Espinosa. We've seen Pomeranz good and bad. We've both watched his games. He likes to live up high in the zone with that new cutter, which really worries me. Do you think that Pomeranz gives them a chance to go ahead and lock down the division? And is there a possibility if the Giants get rid of Matt Cain or Jake Peavy, and if they've added a pitcher, that maybe we see Boston go pull someone like that over to their team, or are they going to work solely out of their farm system?
I personally think, Boston needs to make that move to lock up a pitcher. Well, you can ask the question, okay, would they be in this situation if John Lester wouldn't have left? And it's a good question to bring up. And your question, who will they lock up in the free agent market next year? Do they need another pitcher? Yes. Do I think the current staff that they have now can lead them to, where they want to go? Right now, no. But living around the Carolina League and going to some of the Salem Red Sox games, I've seen some good prospects here in Salem and around the area, that can shine and can prove themselves if just given a chance. And it might not be with Boston. It might be with another club. Like Manny Margot, he got traded from Boston to San Diego, and he's raking it with San Diego's farm system. maybe that's a guy that and he, he had a great defensive year last year for Salem while he was here. And it was kind of a bummer to see him go and to see him leave. But I think, personally, I believe that Boston, in order to make the push, to make the run and continue their success, they need to get back to their pitching. And
is there faith in Dave Dombrowski that him coming over from Detroit, that he can get that done? Because it's a big shoe set to fill when Theo Epstein leaves and goes to the Cubs, and now Dombrowski's coming over trying to kind of bring that winning culture back after a couple of lackluster years after that 2011 World Series.
It's going to be hard to bring back that winning attitude. You see Lester leave, and that kind of was a shock to Boston of, okay. And in my mind, I was kind of reading as Lester's way of putting it is, I don't think you all can win, and I want to get somewhere I can win now. And, you see Chicago make the push to get Aroldis Chapman. I personally believe if Boston's going to make that push, they got to start their pitching staff. I mean, their offense is okay, their defense is good, but in order to win a division and make the push and to get back to the promised land, I personally believe it's got to start their pitching staff, whether it's in the farm system or going out there and getting free agents next year, like you said earlier, or whatever it is. But they just need to get back to their foundation, and that's getting their young arms and the guys that are there in their pitching staff now ready to go.
I completely agree, actually, with what JW is saying. Boston is gonna need to pick up a fifth arm. I mean, we watched Pomerantz play the other day, and he came back with that curveball, and it was effective for him. He was getting people to swing and miss on it. 6 of his 7 strikeouts were swings and misses on that knuckle curve he throws. But his tendency to want to stay up with that cutter and want to throw that cutter is going to hurt him. It's been hurting him all year. It hurt him against the Giants. It's going to hurt him again. My real question, the question that I have about the American League East, has to do with the Blue Jays. The Blue Jays didn't really do much of anything leading up to the trade deadline, and then they make a trade and pick up B.J. Upton. And it doesn't make any sense to me. He's a bad presence in the clubhouse. He gives them maybe 30 points in batting average above the guy that they had in the spot before, and it seems like they're getting more bad than good for B.J. Upton. And I just was wondering if you had any insight as to what the Blue Jays were thinking trading for him.
I mean, it's one of those questions that you ask yourself when you get the email or the media alert saying that he's gone to this team, and you're shaking your head. You're like, why? Yes, he had a restoring year in San Diego. Yes, he has some down years with Atlanta. But to me, he's not that consistent player. Is he a Jose Bautista? No. Is he a Donaldson guy? No. Is he as quick as he was when he was younger? No. So why trade for him, And that brings up a good point. I personally don't like the move. I don't like the way that, that Toronto, I don't know what Toronto's thinking in that situation. I mean, I don't know if they're thinking, okay, maybe we get him and then, once the season's over, we can think about what we're going to do. Maybe they could fool us, and he could wind up raking it while he's there and lead them to a World Series title. Do I think that'll happen? Personally, no. But anything's possible. We know this. It's baseball. Anybody can rake any good time, but anybody can also have a down year. And maybe he can lift them and have a great second half of the season, or maybe he can tear them down and have the worst second half season of his career.
And I guess the beauty of it is, kind of going over the numbers, I think that San Diego's eating all but, what was it, Chris, like $500,000 of his contract? So if he does rake at least where he's at now, I mean, he's hitting 30 points higher than Bautista, you got to think maybe at least makes him a decent trade option. The other move they made is they grabbed Liriano, and I like the move. Pittsburgh, I think, has gone ahead and sold out. They know they're not going to make the playoffs this year. The biggest issue that they're facing is they're in probably one of the toughest divisions in Major League Baseball. They just can't catch a break. Clint Hurdle's a good manager. They have good players, but it seems like they can't ever put it together. So they trade Liriano, who's had kind of a rough year. It helps, the top line of that rotation. But what does it do to their farm system? Because they give up a pretty decent chunk of prospects.
Yeah, it hurt them. It's going to hurt their progression in the farm system. That brings us back to, the Yankees farm system. They had a decent and okay and above average farm system. Okay, but when they started making these trades, they went out and they got Torres from the Cubs, and then they went out and made other deals and made other transactions and other moves, and now all their minor league guys that were in there that probably weren't even in the top team, in the team's top 30 with the current club are now in the Yankees top 30. And all those guys, most of them have an ETA is of 2018, 2019. And it brings you back to the question, of like you were asking. In my opinion, it does hurt their farm system. It's going to hurt them, at least I say, for another 2 years.
And I think, and to your point you just made, that I believe the Yankees now have the highest number. My dad's going to hate hearing this, but they have the highest number of I believe it was Keith Law's top 30 prospects.
Yeah.
6 of those prospects are going to be in the Yankees organization now. So, it was something that we discussed, and we'll touch on really quick. But I felt like the Yankees won the trade deadline, but for an entirely different reason than what we've come to expect from them. I mean, Brian Cashman knocked it out of the park as a GM who really has never had to be a seller.
Mm-hmm.
It's great. I mean, he got, 4 or 5 guys from Chicago for Chapman, and most likely Chapman wants to come back. So, I mean, I know you saw most of the names, and you've probably seen some of these guys, but, I mean, Gleyber Torres was a huge name that came over, and I mean, so I don't know. I feel like, and we'll get into this, but I thought the Cubs really kind of sold out in the expectation that this year has to be the year.
Yeah. Yeah, and real quick too, somebody sent me a message on Twitter and they're like, why did the Yankees sell out? And I was thinking, they might have sold, but they also were buying, and they bought big and they've won. Like, if they were playing the lottery, they would have won the jackpot. I mean, they won it all. They went out and they got what they wanted. And like you said, Chapman, who's in Chicago, just for the remainder of this year, the Yankees can say, oh, well, here, we'll sign you to this beautiful contract. He can come right back to New York.
Yeah, and I think that, everyone keeps saying the Yankees are selling out as we get ready to move on from that. But the ironic thing is everyone's been saying the Yankees need to get younger. They got some great pitching prospects.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I think the Yankees did, in addition to picking up all this youth, and I think that was something that they made very clear coming into the last few weeks of the trade deadline, that they wanted to get young, they wanted to get rid of some old money. But one of the things that I think that they did, in addition to picking up young guys, was getting rid of guys who were hurting them. Chapman was a guy that in a perfect world, they wanted Aroldis Chapman on the team. I think if he does come back next year, that's going to be to make a playoff run. Miller's another guy that is a guy that you want on the team. But guys like Ivan Nova, I mean, that guy was hurting the team, and to be able to get rid of him to the Pirates even for 2 unnamed players is, in my book, gives them a solid A rating in their deadline push.
Oh yeah, I mean, and that's the thing too. Like if I was ranking the Yankees above everybody else right now in the trade deadline and putting top to 5, the Yankees would be number 1 above everybody. And you could make the argument that, with their prospects and stuff now, and their ETAs being 2018, 2019, come 2019, their roster could be loaded with all this young talent. And, I was talking to a scout who was basically marking Torres, you know, even though he doesn't play the full-time position as Jeter, but they're marking him as a young Derek Jeter with his arm, his ability to work the strike zone, and everything like that, just his calm and coolness at the plate, in the field, the way he interacts with the fans. There's like a real high-rise market now for New York, and you're like, okay, if I'm a Yankee fan, I'm excited.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
What can you tell us, and Chris is the resident Giants homer. The Giants made a great move in acquiring Matt Moore from the Rays. I mean, the Rays have been on a steady decline since before Joe Madden left. I think Joe Madden read the tea leaves perfectly and went to a fantastic situation. But they get rid of one of their starting pitchers, still have two good ones in Chris Archer and Jake Odorizzi. What can you tell us, because we know they're getting Matt Duffy, who has already proved to be a solid player at that hot corner for San Francisco, and we know Longoria is more so now a DH. I went to the game last night. He was the DH. He's not playing third as much. So Duffy is, I think, likely going to be that starting third baseman at least by next year. But what can you tell us about Fox and Santos coming over from San Fran, and the pieces that Cleveland sent over as well for Brandon Guyer?
You know, it's a good pickup for Tampa, but it brings it back to the point that we were making earlier. You know, you can have great offense, but if you don't have that good pitching, it's going to be hard to win games. You know, and with mostly of my time covering the Appalachian League and the Carolina League and the minors for 27 outs, you know, it's like the Philadelphia Yankees. They're stacked on the offensive defensive side of the ball, but their pitching, it's just not there, and that's why they're sitting at 18-21 and a 64-68 game season. And they had such high potential coming in, but, you know, if you don't have the pitching, you don't really have, you know, in my opinion, much of a chance to win a lot of baseball games. And right now, I think that's what's hurting Tampa Bay. You know, it was a good move to get Duffy. You know, yes, it was. But what's that say for Longoria? You know, when his contract comes up, will he resign? Will he leave? Will he go somewhere else? You know, that's the main topic now that most Tampa Bay Ray fans want to know. And if I was going to put $1 on it, and if I'm a guessing man, I would say he wouldn't re-sign with Tampa. You know, I would personally say he would go somewhere else where he thought he could win a championship.
That's just a lot, just because, I mean, Longoria has been the face of that franchise, you know, for years. I mean, I think one of the most iconic, you know, plays still is the number 162, you know, the walk-off homer that sent them to the playoffs over the Yankees of all people.
It was over the Yankees, yep.
You know, guys, you are listening to a special edition of Out of Left Field. Chris and Graham here, along with J.W. Gravley. He is a minor league baseball writer for 27 Outs Baseball. You can follow him at J.W. Gravley. You can follow them at 27_Outs Baseball. Always follow us on Twitter at OOLeftField. You can email us, ooleftfield@gmail.com, and find us on Facebook. Just search Out of Left Field. You'll see the same picture on our Twitter account as you will on our Facebook page. As we transition into the Central, the Indians had a successful end of the deadline, but it was not what they hoped it was going to be. You know, we come into Sunday thinking, holy crap, man, the Indians just locked down the American League, good to go, and then about 3 hours later, Jonathan Lucroy, you know, tells them what number he thinks they are and says, no, thank you. Now, granted, I think both parties here screwed the pooch. I mean, you know, he had certain teams on his no trade clause, the Indians being one of them. You would have thought that management would have cleared this with the agents first. So we know they get Andrew Miller. You and I talked on Twitter a couple of days ago, and I think you were mentioning that the Indians were taking a look at Carlos Beltran and considering a run at him, and I didn't like the idea. I feel that they've already been, you know, too old as it is. On the corners, you were working Napoli at first, Uribe at third, who's now been designated for assignment, and I didn't think that adding another older body was going to do them good. So they go out and get Brandon Guyer from Tampa Bay, which I think was great. You know, it adds some youth Still adds a good bat, especially against lefties. But the big thing now with Yan Gomes hurt and Derek Norris didn't move, what the hell do the Indians do with the catcher position? They need a field general, and they got nothing.
It's a good question. It's one of those things that you're sitting there, you're like, man, Lucroy's going to the Indians. Like you said, they're locking it down. They're making that push, and then roughly, you wake up in the next morning and you're like, okay, let's see what happens today. And the big news to start off the deadline, Lucroy vetoed going to the Indians. And you're like, wow, why? And my personal opinion, where he's at now compared to where he would have been, I think he would have a better shot with being with Cleveland and making a bigger playoff run than where he is now. But, it's also one of those things that you said, the managers and agents in both clubs, they should have sat down and said, okay, we need to find out what the perks are here before we come to an agreement on this deal so both of us don't look like we're stupid and get slapped in the face.
What makes you think, and I'm surprised you said that, what makes you think that he would have had a better chance for a deeper playoff push with Cleveland than he will in Texas?
I just like the way that personally, the way he plays the catching position, I think he's going to have a better chance of being the field general for Cleveland for 5 or 10 years than he would in Texas. But both parks are known for hitters and pitchers. I think hitting-wise, I think he would have done better at Progressive Field than with the Rangers. But looking at it short-term, you can see why he went to Texas instead of Cleveland. You got several young guys. You got Joey Gallo, who's up and down all the time. And if he can stay consistent and make it to the big leagues, Texas can make that push. But you got guys in Cleveland that are the same way, and he could have helped them make that push. I personally believe with Cleveland, he would have had a better shot than where he is now, and that's with the Texas Rangers.
Okay. I think, Chris and I think for us, we see a little bit more. I see a little bit more depth with the Rangers. I mean, obviously you have Kluber. Kipnis is a nice piece on the infield, but they're still a little bit of an older team. I know that you have Shin-Soo Choo and Prince Fielder, but Darvish, Hamels, Odor, Profar, Andrews. Chris, I mean, I see you kind of raise your eyebrows. What are you thinking about that? Because I know we've talked a lot and really thought the Rangers had almost locked up the American League with this move.
I think that the addition of Lucroy to the Rangers does lock the American League up for them. More so than just their division. I think that they're going to be the team to beat going through October. My interest in the Rangers deal isn't really in the fact that Lucroy rejected the trade with the Indians. I think that had we known about the no trade clause, and then the 8 teams that were on that were involved in that clause, we would have been less surprised by that. Not a whole lot of people want to go to Cleveland. Cleveland's got a good team. They've been playing really good for the last few years, but historically they haven't been the team where everybody's, clamoring to get to Ohio to play for Cleveland. Whereas for the last almost decade or so, people have been trying to get to Texas to see if they can help the Rangers win a championship. I think that a lot of that push started with Nolan Ryan heading down there to run baseball operations for them. And I think him stepping away has kind of hurt the Rangers a little bit. But I agree with Graham. I think that the Rangers might be the deeper team. Although you might see something on the minor league side that we don't see when we're looking at the major league baseball team, because we really only see what Joey Gallo and Profar as their 2 top prospects, and we don't really see, the Indians farm team or farm system may be deeper, and you may know more about that.
You know, personally, you know, I believe farm system-wise, if Cleveland calls their guys up, Cleveland can be a deeper team. But you also look, you know, that they have let go of some of their top talent too. You know,
that was my next question: is how bad did they hurt themselves going out for Miller? Because they went all out for Andrew Miller.
I mean, you know, if we're talking injury list and all that, the Indians put themselves on a 60-day disabled list and probably hurt themselves long run. And the prospects, you know, I mean, like I said, a lot of the guys that came over to New York from other teams, yes, some of them were in the top 30 on other teams, but a lot of them weren't. And now you look at the top 30 for the Yankees, and you're like, wow, there's like several that are now from from that old organization that are here, and they're in the top 30. And you know that brings you back to the Yankees and why people are raving for them now. And yes, in my opinion, it did hurt Cleveland. You know, and that could have been a decisive factor, too, if Lucroy had the feeling that, you know, Miller was coming to Cleveland. You know, granted, you know, you never know until anything's really done, but he could have had an inside source, too, saying, you know, Miller's coming to Cleveland, here's what they're giving up for him, and that could have been a reason why he didn't go there, and that's why he chose Texas. You know, nobody really knows that other than Lucroy and his agent and possibly the two teams that were involved. But
I think it's scary just because we talked about the possibility the Yankees weren't going to be relevant, and they've, I think, made themselves relevant for the next decade again, you know, with maybe a year or two of being down. The Tigers, to me, really flopped at the deadline. No reason to get into them. They really confused me because they're 4 games back in a division, and they did nothing.
Yeah, I mean,
most of the Central flopped at the deadline. I mean, realistically, we could sit here and say the Tigers, the Royals, and the Twins didn't do anything, and the White Sox failed in all of their attempts.
Yeah.
And that would wrap up the Central at this point.
Yeah. Other than talking about, you know, throwback uniforms and Chris Sale with scissors and all this, I mean, it would be more fascinating talking about emojis and Chris Sale taking scissors and cutting up throwback uniforms and talking about what happened in the Central with the trade deadline.
Right.
The one thing I'll disagree with you on, Chris, I don't think the Royals really failed. To me, they still have a really good core group of guys in that team. You've seen Moustakas get hurt. Hosmer is still hitting well. Perez is hitting well. Their pitching has not been that good. Edinson Volquez was on the trade block. Rodon Ventura was a hothead this year when he got cocked in the jaw by Machado. Wade Davis is hurt. So to me, when you still have one more year of the main core of that group together, I think it makes sense to not make a drastic move now for something that you're not going to make the playoffs this year.
Right. I agree. But they didn't make a move at all. I mean, they did. Right. They did nothing. They got one. They made one trade with the A's for Billy Burns and immediately sent him to the Storm Chasers.
Well, and the goal was to try and trade Wade Davis before he got hurt, and that's really what hurt him. Is that Wade Davis, who has been a constant piece of that bullpen, who has started to slide, the collateral that they had for him and the equity they had kind of fell off. The one thing I want to ask you is, because you're right out of the Central, JW, what happened? We know that Quintana was a possibility. Sale was a possibility. Never happened. And I'm sure the going rate was insane. But do you have any idea, looking through the White Sox organization, from what you've heard from your sources, from other other executives on maybe the minor league level or anybody up in the big club, why wasn't Todd Frazier's name ever thrown around? It seemed like he would have been a really good fit at the hot corner for a couple of teams to add a bat and help them make that push.
You know, that I have been asked that question more than one time. And, you know, I got an answer that really shocks people. I was like, okay, well, why don't the White Sox and the Cubs make a deal? You know, you could have said, okay, we'll send Frazier over to the Cubs for the prospects in return that the Yankees got. And a lot of fans have been like, whoa, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. But then you look at the system and you're like, okay, this can make sense in the long run if we're wanting to make a playoff push. I said at the beginning of the year, and I'll say it now, I thought last year was the year for the Cubs. This year, like I said, I'll say it again, I think it's the year of the Giants. I think the San Francisco Giants are going to win the World Series.
Oh, no, you really had to say that, didn't you? Crap, I'm not going to. Chris, stop pumping your arms. Oh, my Lord. You're killing me, JW. Killing me, man.
I said it at the beginning of the year. I'll say it again. I think it's going to come down to the Giants. And then in the American League, I had unfortunately, I had the Royals in there, but it doesn't look like the Royals are going to, make that push, really. Even though they possibly can, there's still a lot of baseball left to play, but they got a lot of work to do. And, and like y'all said, Billy Burns, he got traded, but then all of a sudden he got sent right back down. He got sent down to the minors. And you're like, okay, that makes no sense. And so right. in reality, it's like, okay, the Royals didn't do much to make that push. And you got the Giants out here that are, still, over the line for being healthy. They got a good pitching lineup. They got good hitting. They got good defense. And it's an even number year. It's 2016. It's a Giants year. Why not?
That's right. I got a question for you. Since there's not really anything to talk about except for how the White Sox probably screwed the pooch with Chris Sale and Quintana. And what I mean by that is that the White Sox are talking about they want to rebuild, and they could have gotten out and gotten the world for these two pitchers, and built an entire team around the trades made for just those two guys. And they didn't do it because they wanted to hold these pocket aces and hope the flop worked out for them, and it didn't. So since there's not a whole lot to talk about in the Central besides how badly the White Sox played that.
Well, to be fair, Chris, they're both two really good team-friendly deals.
Right.
Just to be devil's advocate, they really are team-friendly deals for those two guys, and they'll still hold value going into next year too, I think.
The question I have for you is, being around minor league guys, which is something that we don't get to do or even talk about nearly enough. I used to live in Sacramento, so I used to get to watch the River Cats play on a pretty regular basis. I'm from Sacramento, and I also used to live in Tacoma, so I got to watch the Rainiers play on a pretty regular basis. But where I live now, there's no minor league baseball near me. I do live pretty close to Phoenix, so I get to watch the Diamondbacks play a little bit. But what is it like for a minor league guy who gets involved in one of these trades for one of these big name major league guys? Are they happy about these trades? Is this good for them? Is this something they enjoy? Do they enjoy moving around, getting to go to different teams, or is this something that they don't like as much?
I experienced that last year with a couple minor league guys from the Toronto Blue Jays, and they were with the Bluefield Blue Jays. And, it's a mixed emotion for them. They love the organization that they're with because usually that's the team that drafted them. But at the same time, you're like, and they're like, okay, you can write anything on Twitter, but like a player that I won't name said, he was excited to fulfill this chapter with this new organization. And then he came back and thanked the other team. Yes, in some stances, I guess they could be excited because they're going to a team with tradition, with a win and lay. They know they're going to get their chance compared to where they are, where they think, okay, I might be down here for 5-6 years in the AAA league or wherever and never get the calls in the majors. But then, they get traded to a team and they're all of a sudden that guy to get promoted. A lot of times, I guess it could be good and bad for the minor league guys. One, it's already hard enough on them because a lot of them are younger than 21, so they're at that age where they're just either a high school or college, getting drafted and put into a farm system. Then number two, you got them not really being at home. They're never home. They're always on the road for 60 days, 70 days, however long the season is. And then three, if a trade happens, they're all of a sudden gone from where they were to where they possibly don't want to be or where they do want to be. And it's just like, the Reds and the Mets made a deal for Bruce. And in that deal was a guy that I got really familiar with and got to really know personally on a personal level too. And his name was Max Hotel. And he was pitching for Kingsport. And, and I haven't really talked to him since the trade was happened and everything, so I don't really know his feelings. But he was happy to be with the Reds, but he was also sad to leave the Mets organization because that's the team that gave him a shot.
Right.
And it looked like that Cincinnati got a real good. I mean, he looked like, from what I've seen, a really good piece for Cincinnati to build around. A strong arm.
Oh yeah, and that's the thing. Like Max Hotel it's just not a good guy on the mound. He's one of those guys that you could possibly build your team around, for years to come. And I was talking to a scout as soon as he got traded, and he said that Max's ETA could be next year or 2018, if not by 2019. I mean, his pitching delivery is weird as crap, but it works. The kid can go anywhere from 97 to 80 miles an hour in a snap of a finger. So,
wow.
and the stuff works. Unfortunately for him, he was pitching with Kingsport Mets, rookie league affiliates in New York, against the Pulaski Yankees in Pulaski, and he got taken out of the game. And talking to people around that trade, that was the reason why the trade was being held up. And they came to find out that's what it was, and it wasn't Brandon Nemo because he wasn't in the deal. It was Max Hotel and his physical and all this and his medical. And that's what was holding up the deal, but everything got finalized and it went through. And when I saw his name on there, to a point I was surprised, but to a point I wasn't surprised,
And it's probably, as we move on from that, a nice career move for him because, as a starting pitcher, it's, you have a bit of a hard time breaking into the bigs with a team that has Matt Harvey, Noah Syndergaard, and Jacob deGrom as their top three on the bump. As we kind of run through the West real quick, I have two questions. First, how in the hell did the Rangers manage to pull off Lucroy and Beltran? I think were two great gets for them because Beltran adds a bat and a little bit of an outfield presence without losing Joey Gallo and Jurickson Profar. And second, from what I've read and seen about him and talked to some guys that know him, Dan Vogelbach is supposed to be a fantastic first base prospect that came from Chicago to Seattle for the Montgomery trade. Do we see Vogelbach in the bigs this year, as it seems pretty evident that Adam Lind is on his way out of Seattle? And if not, does he compete for the starting job next year?
No, I think he can be. I think he'll be up there. I think he'll be in the bigs this year. I do. If not this year, definitely by game one next year. If he stays healthy with Seattle and everything, there's no doubt in my mind that he'll be in the bigs. And then back to the Lucroy thing and all that, with Texas, I'm just as stunned and surprised as you all are. How in the world did they make this deal without giving up two big players in their system? Two young players at that.
Yeah, I love that they kept Profar. I love that they kept Profar. I think he's the heir apparent to Adrian Beltre at third.
Yeah.
In their defense, Brinson and Ortiz are not slouches by any means. I mean, they're great prospects, but
absolutely.
they're not a Profar or a Gallo, either of them.
No. And that's the thing too. Like, a lot of people are wondering, okay, well, Texas, it seems like they're pulling the heartstrings of Joey Gallo. Yeah, they'll call him up, keep him there for a week or two, and then they'll send him back down for a month or two, and then they'll call him back up and send. It's like so for him not to be traded, and for me, I was surprised. But, if I'm a Ranger fan, I'm like, yes. We got what we wanted. We got the push that we needed with Beltran and Lucroy, and we also got to keep two guys that we wanted to keep. So, and
I think hopefully that at least ups his confidence a little bit in what the organization believes in him, that, they really didn't seem to make him an active piece in the trade. His name was tossed around, but it didn't seem to be very, very heavy. As we transition over to the National League, the only one I want to ask you, and I like the Melanson grab by the Nationals. I've heard Taylor Hearn's name tossed around. The Nationals train here in Vieira, which is about 5 minutes from where I am, and as I umpire, and I've gotten a chance to work some of their extended spring games. So, first off, what are the Nationals losing by trading Taylor Hearn? And I don't know if you have any knowing with this one, but I had a game with Aaron Barrett, who was recovering from Tommy John surgery, and he fractured his elbow and had to have surgery again by Dr. James Andrews. Is his career over?
You know, so many players can rebuild from that. Personally, I don't know if his career is over, but I think it puts a damper on his career. You know, I think it's going to be hard for him to be 100% healthy. You know, anytime you got to go through 2 surgeries of the same thing or even a different thing, it's really hard for you to come back from that. You know, when I was playing baseball as a younger kid, I had to have 2 ACL surgeries, and that ruined my career. You know, I couldn't recover from it. I couldn't do anything about it, you know.
I have a question for you regarding the National League East. And it's actually, I was hoping maybe you could settle an argument between Graham and I.
Mm-hmm.
So, in my opinion, and solely in my opinion, in the last 4 or 5 years, the Marlins organization has really stuck it to their fans. I mean, they've put together these big name teams who they expect to do well and use those names to get Miami to agree to pay for a stadium. And then in 2012, they do a $169 million salary dump to the Blue Jays, get rid of every big name player they've got. And then they do it again last year. And then this year at the trade deadline, we see them give up 4 or 5 decent prospects, and in return, they got a pitcher from
Andrew
Diego.
Cashner and Colin Ray.
Well, they didn't keep Colin Ray, so I won't.
Colin Ray went back to San Diego.
Yeah,
right.
Which the Marlins are lucky that they got that deal reneged on. They didn't have to, which really could have.
Right. They didn't have to get Steve back. But so they get Cashner from San Diego, who is a +4 ERA pitcher, and I don't understand. See, in my opinion, they're doing it again, right? In my opinion, the Marlins are doing it again. They're getting rid of money. They're dumping off salary. They're getting rid of prospects, and they're getting back guys who aren't going to help them win championships because Cashner is not a championship caliber player, in my opinion. And Graham thinks that they're maybe trying to get tools to rebuild, and I don't see it. I think that the Marlins are just doing more of the same that they've been doing for the last 4 years and dumping names and players, and not caring that it's hurting their fans.
Well, to be fair, I don't think they're rebuilding, but what I see in Cashner, I think a lot of guys I've seen, I'm sure you've seen him, JW, is that he's got a ton of potential, and it would turn on and then turn off in San Diego. So I guess the thing is did the Marlins, A, overpay for Cashner, and then B, is this really a blatant sell-off, or are they really going to try and use him to give a little bit of a backbone for Jose Fernandez when he's not on the hill?
No, I personally believe that the Marlins are, slapping their fans in the face again. When I saw that Cashner was coming over, I was like, why? You got a talented club right now. Why do you want a guy with a +4 ERA on your mound and what's now becoming a hitter's ballpark? Why? And then you don't even get to keep the prospect that you wanted in the trade and Colin Ray, and you send him back to San Diego. I don't like the move for Andrew Cashner if I'm a Marlins fan. And it brings you back to the point that you all were saying that y'all were saying he's not a championship caliber pitcher. He's not an ace on the staff. He's not going to be the backbone to Jose Fernandez. If anything, his ERA is going to jump. Now he could prove us all wrong and do fantastic with Miami, but Miami was also in that position that they could have. They're in that run and they're in that talk for a playoff spot if they stay healthy and they stay good. But bringing Cashner over, I don't know if they can do it.
Well, I think you're both wrong. Yes, again, we are out of left field doing a Tuesday edition trade deadline show for you. Chris and Graham here along with J.W. Gravley, a writer for 27 Ounce Baseball. Follow him on Twitter at J.W. Gravley. Follow us at OO Left Field. You can follow JW at JWGravley. Also find us on Facebook. Just search Out of Left Field and you'll see our page there.
I think that there is a third trade that happened at the deadline this year that just kind of made me, rub my head a little bit and wonder what the heck is going on in the National League East. And that is, why did the Braves go out and get Matt Kemp? It doesn't make any sense to either team. If the Braves want Matt Kemp, you have to think that San Diego ate a huge chunk of that contract, which doesn't make sense to them. And getting a Matt Kemp when your win percentage at this point in the season is .350 and you are at the very bottom of the National League East, a Matt Kemp is not going to drag you out of the basement.
And that brings me to this. It's like, players, they would have said, okay, you go to this team and your career dies. Now it seems like, okay, if you sign with the Braves, your career's dying, and everything that you have worked for pretty much does not exist if you sign with Atlanta. I mean, what happened to the Braves? They used to be the team that won division after division after division, playoff games after playoff games after playoff games. They had all these talented players. Even now, they still got talented players, but they're not winning. They're terrible. And
now I got to be honest. Now, see, I don't know if we're friends anymore because you have put about 3 knives in my back. You're agreeing with him on the Marlins deal. You're saying the Giants are going to win the World Series, and now I'm getting the Atlanta thing. Granted, the Braves have been,
by the way,
for a while
Graham is a Braves fan.
Well, grew up a Braves fan. I can be more impartial than some people on this program.
But yeah, in reality, I'm the biggest Braves fan that you'll ever know. And it hurts me to sit here and look at the Braves and say they're terrible. But right now, they're terrible. Their farm system is loaded.
Especially when we're all old enough. Especially when we're all old enough to remember when it was when they had the big three on the mound and they were winning. They were winning games, and then even moving into the sort of the Upton era, right, with BJ and with Melvin and Justin. And
Which really is when it began to die. Yeah, exactly. It began to die in 06 when the bullpen began to the bullpen, once Leo Mazzoni left, really began to decline. Pitching got rough, and then we actually had Chip Carey on the show a couple of weeks ago, and and he made no bones about it that the previous management really made it more of a priority to get current named players who, to be honest, the Braves couldn't afford long term, and they didn't produce a championship. So it really set the Braves back a long way, which we both know, because then now you're in this whole rebuilding idea. And what was always the Braves' strongest suit, very similar to, I think, probably where Theo Epstein has garnered himself as a future Hall of Famer, in my opinion, is probably the best front office executive ever to grace the game. And I'm putting up there with John Sherholtz of he starts in the farm system and works his way up, and he tells the fans, be patient. These Braves had a farm system that was extremely deep between Rafael Furcal. We saw Jeff Francoeur, all these players that came up, even Johnny Estrada, the catcher back in the day, and they never held on to players too long And it seems that once Schierholtz moved up out of the GM spot, that everything just started. I mean, it was a snowball effect, and all of a sudden we have an avalanche of just horrific play for years.
Yeah. I mean, the Braves front office are the ones that can answer it, you know. They got talented guys in their farm system, like Colby Aller, who also started with the Danville Braves and had the privilege of watching him pitch. Top talented guy, best fastball I've seen since covering baseball. And that's just being honest. It's not, you know, being biased or anything. That's just straight out. Anybody could ask me, best fastball I've seen in 5 years, and it's going to be Colby Aller. You know,
what's your take on Dansby? What's your take on Dansby?
I love the kid. You know, he's just got to be given a chance. You know, I saw him at the beginning of the year when he was playing in the Carolina League. Talented guy, can work the strike zones, got good discipline. You know, the Braves will come back around, but their front office has to, in lack of words, get their head out of their butt and get these guys up and get them in the prime position to win ball games. You know, You can't have these top 30 guys, these prospects in your top 30 or your top 100 sitting in the farm league forever, and then when their contracts come up, expect them to stay with you when they're not given a chance. They got to be given a chance now. And, you know, next year, you know, there's some catchers that are coming into the market, and I think with, you know, Przinsky being behind the plate, I think it's hurting the Braves more than it is helping them. You know, it's a good, you know, I don't even think, you know, he's a great clubhouse guy. But can they afford a contract of Wieters and others? I don't think so. But they got to do something to get a good catcher that can talk to the pitchers and get the pitchers to win the ball game.
And obviously Tyler Flowers' injury isn't helping, you know, as he's you know, he's out. I would love personally to see him get Matt Wieters. I keep hearing Brian McCann's name tossed around. I would love to see him get Wieters. I think he'd be, you know, he's really in the prime of his career. I think he'd be really good for that organization. As we begin to transition over, obviously we know what the Cubs did. The biggest thing the Cubs did is get Aroldis Chapman. You know, on our third show we talked about that they needed a lefty arm when they got it. I don't want to argue with Theo, but I think that they really, like I said, they sold the farm for the hope of getting it this year. And I'm of the mindset I think that the Cubs are still the team to beat, but I still think it's going to be a Giants-Cubs NLCS, and I pray it goes 7 and it comes down to the last half.
Well, it's going to come down to which one of their aces, whose ace is better, right? Is Madison Bumgarner the better ace, or do the Cubs have the better ace? I mean, when you look at postseason records, it's not hard to see how that falls.
Right.
Sorry, but that's just the case.
I'm with you. I understand it.
We all know that the Pirates had a bit of a fire sale there at the end. Got rid of some guys. I think the Pirates gave up on this season, maybe looking at rebuilding. The Brewers.
Huh. The Brewers.
What happened with Ryan Braun? Yeah, what happened with Ryan Braun, Chris? We talked about the first show that there had been talk of Braun going to the Giants, but all of a sudden, JW, Braun's name was just completely – it was never in a headline, nothing anywhere. So did something change? Did Milwaukee say we're not going to trade him? Did they have to eat too much money? Did you hear anything as to why he wasn't any kind of, you know, carrot to be dangled for somebody that needs a bat in the outfield?
I did not hear anything about Ryan Braun. But in my personal opinion, the only reason why I could even think or fathom why Milwaukee would keep him was in hopes that they were keeping Lucroy. But all along, all year, even before spring training started, everybody was talking about how Lucroy was going to be moved. He's going to be moved before the deadline. And he was once, vetoed it, and then he was again with like an hour left to go in the deadline. So why Braun is still in Milwaukee and Lucroy is not, it shocks me.
You think Ryan Braun is going to die in Milwaukee? I mean, do you think Ryan Braun...
Chris, do you want to be charged with what the hell?
Ryan Braun is going to retire from baseball at some point in the next 5 or 6 years, and settle down in Milwaukee and just live out his days there because he can't figure out how to get out of there?
Yeah,
I mean,
I do. But what team doesn't want Ryan Braun in their club? Yeah, he had that one incident where, tested positive for all this stuff, but he's not sorry to bust your, what. But he's not Barry Bonds,
Well, I hate Barry Bonds, so we're good.
But, if I'm a Giants fan, I'm wondering why we don't have Ryan Braun right now. Why couldn't we make the move to get him and make the stronger push? Is he as clutch as he was when he was younger? No. No player is usually that clutch as they were when they were younger, but he's still a talented guy. He still has the talent. He still can bat. He still can field. He still can catch. And he's a good clubhouse guy. You need that guy on your roster.
I agree he's a good presence in the clubhouse. I also think that he probably would have been a stronger choice than who we did end up picking up. Now, I don't want to say anything bad about Nunez. I like the guy. I think he's a great ball player. He's not as good defensively as possibly he is made out to be. He had a lot of defensive struggles in New York, and then coming over to the Brewers, I think is really, really where he made up for some of that some of those defensive problems that he had. But the guy's a utility guy. He's never been an everyday guy, so I'm willing to give him a benefit of the doubt. But I think Braun's a better player, no doubt. I think Braun would have been a great choice, except that I don't think anybody wants to pay Ryan Braun $20 million this year.
So, Chris, let me ask you then, are you changing your position from week 1 or week 2 of the show? When we talked about it, your position was that you definitely did not want to see Ryan Braun in a Giants uniform, and it wasn't cash related, but it was him as a player because of the steroid issues. So, saying that after seeing his body of work, are you changing that? Are you changing your opinion on that?
No, I don't. I don't change my opinion on that. I don't want any more. The Giants have had enough problems with players who've had issues with steroids. Barry Bonds, the obvious person to point at with that. But what about Melky Cabrera in 2012? That hurt the Giants. That hurt the Giants to the point where, obviously they were able to recover, come back, win a World Series, but that happening just after the wild card break, or just after the All-Star break, hurt the Giants for most of August. And they went into a real slide after the All-Star break when Melky Cabrera got suspended, and then they didn't want him back. They didn't want him to come back when he was eligible, and yet they still had to give the guy a ring because he played half a year for them. And they didn't want to do that either. And I don't want to see – and I would never say Ryan Braun is still using performance-enhancing drugs. I don't think he is, and I think his numbers can really prove that out. He's playing well, but he's not playing like Ryan Braun was playing when he was using steroids.
Right.
So – but I don't want any other steroid names associated with the Giants from a fan standpoint.
Okay. JW, let me ask you this as we get ready to kind of round out the last half of the National League West here. Real quick, I'm sure you've seen it, but it was all over that Yasiel Puig has been sent down to the minors. They optioned him back. I like that they grabbed Josh Reddick. It adds power to the outfield, which has been subpar with the Wood, except for Trace Thompson. He's been probably the best bat. Jock Peterson has been subpar really since last year at the Derby and the first half of the season. We know that Rich Hill and Bud Norris are no Clayton Kershaw, but with them sending Puig back to the minors, what are you hearing in your circles and your sources? What is it saying to other teams about the state of the Dodgers franchise, and what does it do to their farm system?
I was going to kind of beat up on the Dodgers to build them up at the same time, and this was before Puig even got sent down or there was talks. I love the move for the Dodgers of getting Reddick and those guys from Oakland, but I absolutely hate the deal in another perspective of sending top prospects to Oakland, and not just prospects, I mean pitching. So, you know, we all know baseball is pitching. Granted, the Dodgers have good pitching. They have good guys, but when Urias was with the Dodgers earlier this year, he kind of struggled. Then he kind of got hot. And then, you know, we've seen transitions and things happen. I don't like the move of sending Yasiel Puig down to the minors. If I was going to do that, if I was the Dodgers front office, and if I was going to move Puig down to the minors, I would have said, here, you can have him. Who wants him? We're trading him. That's what I would have personally done. I wouldn't have just sent him down to the minors. I would have just said, okay, we're putting him on the market. Best offer, first come, first serve. He's on the table.
I got a question about Urias while we're talking about the Dodgers. And Urias especially, but I mean, Puig could have been. I mean, nobody really wants Yasiel Puig. He's a cancerous sort of presence in the clubhouse. But Urias is a great guy. He's a great pitcher, and he
Young,
did have
19 years old.
Right. He has some real value, and when you see the Dodgers get rid of Greinke, lose Greinke in the offseason, and then Kershaw goes down for the year, which I think surprised everybody. Nobody expects Clayton Kershaw to go down.
Yeah.
But why, when Kershaw went down and they had Urias, why is it that they didn't make a hard push for the White Sox to get either Quintana or Sale to bolster that rotation and to make up for the fact that Clayton Kershaw is not going to be in there every 5 days getting them a W?
You know, great question, because if I'm the Dodgers and the prospects I gave up for Reddick and all those guys to come over, I would have made the same deal to the White Sox for Sale. I would have gave up my top pitching prospect for Chris Sale. I would either go all out and win it, or I'd go all out and lose it. But, you know, I would have took that risk if I was the Dodgers. I said, okay, he's out. We need another guy. We need another left-handed guy. We need a guy that can throw flames, and that's what Chris Sale can do when he's on top of his game. Even when he's off his game, he's still good, just like Clayton Kershaw. You know, okay, and granted, if Chris Sale stayed with the Dodgers, you think of it as a Dodger fan, Dodger GM perspective, or Dodger front office, you're saying, okay, we got Chris Sale. He can be our number 2 starter when Kershaw comes back healthy. He's our number 1, and if we're in the playoffs and we're playing a 3 or 5 game series or whatever, and we're pitching these two guys 1 and 2, and they win, we can make the push for a title. We can make the push for a run, and for them not to do that, it kind of leaves me confused and shaking my head as to why, okay, you get these two guys in Reddick and the other one that they got from Oakland, I'm drawing a blank.
Rich Hill, the pitcher?
Yeah.
But you give up your a lot of top prospects. I think they gave up the number 5 prospect, number 13, number 18 for these guys. You know, the Dodgers won that trade on the hitting standpoint. But personally, I think the Athletics got the better deal out of that trade because they got some top-tier pitching prospects that are Major League Baseball ready probably right now.
And it would have made sense to go for Sale and trade those guys because Sale is locked up. He's on a rental. You got him for at least another year, maybe 2 with the option. We're here with J.W. Gravley, from 27 Ounce Baseball at JWGravley. This is a special trade deadline edition of Out of Left Field at OO Left Field on Twitter, Out of Left Field on Facebook. But let me ask you a question as we go to Colorado real quick, because all of a sudden the Rockies are making a semi-hard charge up the wild card standings. I don't think they're going to sustain it, but the name that we've seen a lot, really their lone all-star, was Cargo. And all of a sudden we get crickets on that side. Was he shopped at all and nobody met the asking price, or was there just no interest on the Rockies' part to want to part with him?
It was a little bit of both. Nobody really wanted to jump the bait at that, and I don't think really Colorado wanted to file a divorce with him, you know, in other terms. But while we're on Colorado and while we're talking about baseball, what a story that Colorado had, and Trevor Story, who was lighting it up earlier in his first, 6, 8 ball games, hitting a home run in every game, and then he cooled off and he's starting to get back on the home run streak. Do I think Colorado has what it takes to make that push and stay where they are now? I don't. Colorado is pitcher's life or death. I mean, pretty much.
Yes.
Like, if you're a pitcher in Colorado or a visiting pitcher, your ERA is on life support no matter what. Your ERA could be at a 2, and you could leave Colorado with it being a 16.
I feel bad when Graham said that it doesn't look like Colorado is going to be able to sustain this sort of run that they're on.
Yeah.
And then I turn around and look at the transactions list for the day. Trevor Story goes on the 15-day DL list today, tore his UCL in his thumb. Yeah, so he's going to be down for a little while. Gerardo Parra, however, did make a jump in his rehab assignment. He jumped from the, some of these minor league names are just make you envision the most frightening animals known to mankind, like the Hartford Yard Goats.
Yeah.
But he made a jump from the Hartford Yard Goats to the Albuquerque Isotopes, so he's playing high A baseball again. Gerardo Parra is, and so it looks like his rehab assignments are going well, and he could be back sooner rather than later. But losing Trevor Story on a ligament tear in the thumb is going to hurt.
Yeah, that's rough.
Now
that's rough.
It's the left thumb, which is bad because that's his glove hand. So it could be rough.
Yeah.
I got a question for you though. Before and we are running out of time here a little bit. We don't want to go over too much. But when Miami made this deal with San Diego, they got Josh Naylor, who is a pretty decent prospect. But and Carter Capps. Carter Capps is when I mentioned Carter Capps was a part of this trade, Graham was really surprised to hear that because Carter Capps is one of those people who, when he does come back from TJ, he's going to be fun to watch because he's going to be one of those guys who you either love him because he plays for your team or you hate him because of the way he throws the ball. And, he does that sort of hop step that he got penalized for in the minor leagues. And then coming up in the majors, Major League Baseball said that as long as he drags the toe, they're fine with the hop step. But Josh Naylor, who is a top first base prospect, what do you think San Diego plans to do with a guy like that?
It's an open field for Josh Naylor with San Diego. Now with being with that club and everything, he's out there doing, good things. He's played in 3 games for their high A club, and he's already batting, I believe it was 200 last time I checked. I don't know if the team's playing now. I think he's got a home run or an RBI or 3 RBIs somewhere in there. So he's already saying, okay, do you miss me yet? And he's kind of, already giving high fives to San Diego and saying, I want to prove you right, and I'm going to do right by you, and I'm going to try to lead this team to where we need to go.
Yeah.
And I think hearing that, Chris, as we kind of round up, I hate to say it, I think that kind of proves your point that you and I were going back and forth that Miami had to have overpaid. They're getting Luis Castillo back, but I almost wonder if Josh Naylor would have had a better grab.
Right, and
they're trying to get him back for Colin Ray.
They're getting Luis Castillo back, but not because they want him back. They're getting him because they think that Colin Ray was damaged goods. But let's look at Colin Ray, the guy that they wanted in that deal, right? We've heard that Andrew Kashner was the guy that they took, and Colin Ray was the guy that they wanted. But Colin Ray is running a 5.95 ERA this year.
Yeah.
And so for them to be like, well, that's the guy we wanted in the trade, but he's damaged, makes you think, why did you want a guy with almost a 6 ERA?
Yeah.
Why
and then,
that guy you were after?
And when they came out and it was that there were going to be repercussions for, feeling that they were kind of given damaged goods, the Marlins front office said that they felt they overpaid. So, I think it's going to be an interesting end to the season. I think this is really when everyone's going to begin to make, those is going to start making, the big pushes. I think we're going to see Detroit fall off because they didn't do anything to address their pitching issues. Justin Verlander put out a kind of a cryptic tweet that Chris was talking about, saying that, getting guys off of injury is just as good sometimes as making a big trade. So, and we know Jordan Zimmerman is likely on the way back. We'll see what happens with that. But, man, I'm interested to see, and I hope, JW, that you're willing to come back on with us again down the road, maybe as we kind of end out the season and kind of see what what these trades do and how they're going to play out in the years to come.
Absolutely, I'd love to.
Metal, great job, man. Guys, don't worry, we will still be back with you this weekend. Should we try and get a show out to you Friday or Saturday? We'll have a chance to really see what these new acquisitions are doing for their teams, and hopefully we'll start to see if someone maybe makes the wrong call on top of everything else that's going on in baseball. Want to thank J.W. Gravley from 27 Ounce Baseball. Again, you can follow them at 27_ounce baseball. Follow JW at JW Gravley. That's at JW Gravley. Again, guys, please follow us on Twitter at OOLeftField. You can email us ooleftfield@gmail.com and find us on Facebook, Out of Left Field in the search bar. Guys, again, thank you for joining us for this MLB trade deadline version Out of Left Field, and we will see you back and better this weekend with a couple more crazy things coming straight out of left field.